Hello and welcome to Swift Goose. In today's video we are going to look at making a menu bar application for Mac that will be a crypto tracker. So when you open it up, we're going to track three different cryptos: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin, their price in US dollar, as well as their percent change. The first thing we'll do is create a new macOS app, hit next, and we're going to call this crypto tracker. And you want to set interface as Storyboard and make sure that core data and include tests are unchecked, as well as language being on Swift. Next, create app. Let's go ahead and expand this to give us more room. Now inside of our crypto tracker, you'll notice we have the project and the targets. Under targets, you want to make sure your deployment target is set to 12.1. I'm running Xcode 13 and I set this to 12.1. You can set it to 12.2 if you want to. Next thing you want to do is go to your signing and capabilities. Under your sandbox, you want to make sure that you have incoming connections and outgoing connections checked. Without these checked, your API calls will not actually reach the API server and you won't get any data back. Inside the info tab, let's add a new key and we're going to call this application is agent. That's going to switch to Boolean and we want to set this to yes. This will allow us to put the application inside the menu bar and not inside the dock. If you don't have this key value pair, then when you run the app, it's going to appear both in the menu and in the dock, which we don't want. And the next thing we're going to do is add the images to our assets. The images that we're going to use are from icons8.com, and icons, you'll see that you have a whole bunch of different ones for Bitcoin and crypto, but this is the one we're going to use today. To download, choose different sizes that you need, and then you can also select custom sizes. Then hit download, and then you're going to move them to your folder. In the GitHub project repo, you'll have all of the icons available as well, so that might make it easier for you. Let's go back to our project. In our assets folder, I'm going to delete this app icon, and then I'm going to drag in all of the icons that we would use. So the next task is to go to our app delegate, and here we're going to make it so that our application will run as a menu bar item. So first piece to add is a status item. Let status item is equal to ns_status_bar.system.status item with length ns_status_item.square. And then in our application did finish launching, we want to set our status item dot button dot image equal to our ns image named ns image dot name icons8 dot bitcoin dot 26. And we're also going to set our status item dot button dot action to be our selector create popover, so that when we click the button in the menu bar item, it actually does something. We don't have this selector method yet, so let's create that now. Add Objective-C, func, create popover. And here we're going to instantiate our storyboard. So let's say let main storyboard. It's going to be of type storyboard equals ns storyboard.name, and we're just going to grab the main storyboard and set the bundle to be nil. Next, we want to instantiate a view controller based on the storyboard. So guard let vc is equal to main storyboard dot instantiate controller with identifier view controller. And we want to cast this as a view controller, else fatal error, unable to find view controller in storyboard. So essentially this line is going to look for our storyboard and try to instantiate the view controller based on a storyboard ID of view controller. If it can't find it, we'll throw an error. We also want to do guard let button equals status item dot button else fatal error unable to find the status button. So if it failed to create up here, then we also throw an error. Finally, let popover view is equal to ns popover view dot content view controller. I'm going to set that to the view controller we just created. Popover view dot behavior is transient. And finally, we want to show the popover view. So the relative to is going to be button.bounds, and the button and preferred edge is going to be max y. Oops, this should be just button, not ns button. And what's the error we're getting here? Argument passed to call that takes no arguments. So this is instantiate, not initial controller. This should be instantiate controller. There we go. Command K to clean the build. You see we get the item up here. When we click it, there's an error, but that's because we haven't dealt with the ViewController Storyboard ID yet. Stop. So the next thing to do is to connect that Storyboard ID inside of our storyboard. So let's click on our ViewController and then also option click our main storyboard. Now we want to get rid of this window. We don't really need it. Let's drag up this ViewController. We'll make this a little bit bigger here. And essentially what we're going to do is add our image fields, our text fields, and our button. So let's go and add our quit button first at the bottom here. Just change this to quit. Then we're going to add our image. Image view, just put it up here for now. The image itself is going to be Bitcoin, and we want it to be the largest one, so the 512. Let's go ahead and set the height and width to 100, and then we're also going to add our labels. So we'll have one label for, get rid of that, and we'll just put a placeholder as BTC USD. We're going to up the font to 16. Drag it underneath like that, and then we're going to duplicate it, and this one will be BTC 1 day %. Center it again. This one will make size 15. Now we want to go back to our view controller here, and we want to go to our identity inspector. And this is where we take the view controller name and put it as the storyboard ID so that the app delegate knows when to instantiate it to use this storyboard ID. And the next step is to connect our labels to our view controller. So let's close this inspector and give us a little bit more room. So the API is going to return our JSON object, and we have to make a model out of that data. So let's create a new Swift file, and we're going to call this crypto.swift. In here, we're going to do a new group and call this models. And we'll drag our crypto.swift into there. Now let's go back to our browser, and we're going to use the blockchain developer API again. We want to go to our REST API, and I'll include this link in the description below. But basically we want to go to tickers/symbol, and we want BTC USD as just a quick sample. So try it out, and then we can hit execute. And this is the data that was returned in the form of JSON from the server. So let's copy that, and let's open up a new tab and go to app.quickttype.io. Paste the crypto data that was returned. We'll change this to crypto as well. We want to make sure our language is set to Swift over on the right, and that explicit coding key values encodable types is selected. So let's copy all of this, come back to Xcode, and paste it into our file. And now we're ready to create an API class that will handle working with the API. So let's make another new file called api.swift. And here we'll type class blockchain API. So let's make a static asynchronous function that will run our API call. Static func get crypto. And we're going to pass in an enum that we can use to select whatever ticker that we want. Or if we want to run this against all of our tickers, we can easily do that by iterating through all of our cases in the enum. So as a parameter, let's say ticker, and then async throws crypto. We don't have a ticker enum yet, so let's go ahead and create that. Enum ticker, and we want this to be case iterable. And we'll have 3 different cases because we're only looking at 3 cryptos in this particular version of the project. Case BTC, case ETH, and case LTC. So now we have our enum being passed in. Let's create a symbol variable that will store whichever ticker we're using. Keep it blank for now, and we'll switch our ticker enum and say if we're looking at case BTC, then we want our symbol to be BTC USD. Let's build our URL. So we'll say guard let URL equals URL string. Now from here we need to type in the string of the API. So let's go back to our browser. And this is the request URL right here. We paste this in, we delete this, and we just put in our symbol. So now if we pass in ETH or LTC, it'll automatically interpolate into the correct path for that URL. Else, we want to throw an API error because this whole class throws. So what we got to do now is create a new API error class. So let's create a new file, API error. So establish another enum for our errors. It's going to conform to error, and we have case invalid URL, invalid server response, and then finally invalid data. We can extend our API error and make it custom string convertible so that we can add a public description. And with that, let's go back to our API class. And here, if our URL is invalid, then we'll just throw an API error.invalid URL. And now we want to run the API call. So let data and response, since we'll get a data and a response back from the server, hopefully, will be try await URL session.shared.data from URL. Now we want to check the response and the response code from the server. Guard let response equals response as HTTP URL response, and response.status code is equal to 200, else throw an API error.invalid server response. So if the response from the server cannot be cast as an HTTP URL response and the status code is not 200, then we'll throw an error. And finally, guard let crypto equals try JSON decoder.decode. We're going to try to decode the data that was back from the server into our crypto model from data, else throw API error.invalid data. So once we've gotten through all 3 of these guard statements, it's safe to assume that we can return a proper crypto model with all the data that we need in it. So return crypto. So let's go back to our ViewController, create a timer, and then I'm going to create 2 colors based on the color scheme of the icons we chose. One other thing we forgot to do is drag our quit button functionality and create an action below. So let's do that now. Quit pressed, and all that's going to happen is we'll just call nsApplication.shared.terminate sender. So that'll quit the app when they click that button. So let's extend our ViewController to add a custom function called start checking prices. And we're going to call that right when the view did load. So let's create 3 NS text field arrays that will hold the text fields that we put above. API timer is equal to timer.scheduled timer, and we want to do with time interval 1 repeats true, and we'll create our closure here. Every 1 second we're going to run the API call for all 3 of our endpoints, which is going to be the Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. For ticker, in ticker.allCases, since we're running an asynchronous task here, we need to call a task block. And now let's call crypto try await blockchain API dot get crypto. The ticker will just be ticker. Now we can grab the individual pieces from the model. So let last trade price equals crypto dot last trade price. Let price 24 hours equals crypto dot price 24 hour. And then let percent change is equal to last trade price minus price 24 hours divided by price 24 hours times 100. And then our percent string is going to be string formatted according to %2f, so we only get 2 decimal places. And we're going to throw in our percent change string here. And finally, we want to set our text color and then the actual string values for each of these text fields. So what we'll do is put another switch statement here, switch ticker. And before we build out the switch statement, let's build another function that we can use to set the text color. So let's add another extension here to ViewController, and we'll call this func set text color. We'll toss in our array of text fields that we're going to work with. Increased will be bool. So if increased, then for each of our labels, so that's going to be the BTC USD and the BTC %. So for each of those, we want to set the text color to be increased. Else, we know it decreased, so we set each label to be decrease. So now in our switch ticker here, if we have our case BTC, then we want to set text color for our Bitcoin labels, and we want to set them based on if the last trade price is greater than the 24-hour price. We're going to have to put self in here. We also want to put self.btcusd.string value set to string $ plus string of last trade price, and then self.btc%.string value is equal to last trade price So if the last trade price was higher, then we're going to put in a plus. Otherwise, we're just going to leave it blank because there's already going to be a minus there. We'll put in our percent string here. And now we're going to copy this and paste it for our two other cases. So just as a quick overview, our API timer is going to run once every second, repeating indefinitely. Each time it runs, we're going to check each of our tickers, and we're going to asynchronously call our blockchain API based on that ticker to get all the data that we need. we're going to set the string values for our labels as well as the string color based on if the price increased or decreased. So with all that, let's try running. You see that we got build failed. Floating point is not valid. So we forgot a 0 in here. And we also forgot the alpha. Let's try building this again. And the reason we're getting all of these errors here, double and int, is because we have to go back to our crypto model. But the price 24 hour could actually be a double. And most likely will be a double. So what we'll do is put this down here as a double instead, and then delete this line. Now if we come back to our view controller and try to build this again, still getting errors. So this should be a lowercase crypto. Forgot to actually instantiate a JSON decoder here. Let's go back to our view controller, run, and see what we get. So there we have our Bitcoin price. We see that it's decreased, it's purple, percent change has gone down, same thing with Ethereum, but the Litecoin price has increased, and that's why it's blue. You see we do have a little bit of clipping here, so we would have to expand out this label to include that a little bit more. And finally, let's just verify that our quit button works, and it does. The app stopped running. That's it for this project and this app. I do have plans in the future to basically rework this app to make it a little bit more friendly and more customizable so that when we run it, we can add other cryptos in here and they look a little bit nicer and they line up and the icons will look better. And one other thing to note is if we go to our dark mode preferences in system preferences and change it to light, overall you probably would want to make this black and white, or maybe even use the original icons for each crypto. So that's something else that we can work on in the next project. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks for watching.